Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's live reading from Ramayana, the story of Lord Ram. We are on Ayodhya Kanda at the moment. And yesterday we were reading how Sumantra, he had come back to Ayodhya, and the mood in Ayodhya is not a nice one at all at the moment, because Ram, Sita and Lakshman have left for the forest for their 14-year exile, as Kekai had asked from King Dashrath. And we will continue from there onwards. The next morning, when the bards came to awaken the king, his servants stood outside the door with folded hands. However, his consorts entered his room. They found his body without any sign of life. The women cried out in horror, waking Kaushalya and Sumitra with a start. When the two queens saw that the king had passed away, they fell to the floor in agony. Hearing this uproar, Kekai also came. When she understood that the king had died, she too began crying piteously. While caressing her husband's head, Kaushalya harshly addressed Kekai, "I will mount the king's funeral pyre so that I can reside with him in the place where he has gone. Only a sinful wretch like you can bear to go on living in the absence of a husband." The ministers came and led Kaushalya away, trying their best to pacify her. Thereafter they preserved the body of Maharaj Dashrath in a vat of oil, since the funeral ceremonies could only be performed in the presence of a son. Being bereft of their ruler, the citizens of Ayodhya were plunged into gloom. No one was able to sleep that night. The people gathered in the streets, publicly reproaching Kekai to vent their grief. The next morning, the leading Brahmanas of Ayodhya gathered at the court, urging the king's ministers to install one of the king's sons that very day. Addressing Vasishtha, Vamadev, Markandeya, Kasyana, Gautam and other rishis, the Brahmins said, "A country without a king is doomed. In such a place, rogues and thieves take advantage of the situation and lawlessness prevails. In a kingdom without a ruler, ownership disappears, sons disobey father, charity is forgotten, and religious practice declines as the citizens exploit one another." The rishis replied, "What you say is perfectly correct. It is the king that makes the demarcation between good and evil in this world. Bereft of a king, the subjects are just like cattle without a herdsman." Vasishtha suggested, since Bharat has already been selected as their heir apparent, he should be installed upon the throne immediately. Let swift messengers go now to the capital city of King Kekai to bring back Bharat and Shatrughna to Ayodhya. Everyone agreed to the proposal, and messengers were instructed to tell Bharat only that he was urgently required at Ayodhya. After travelling for several days, the messengers arrived at Kekai's capital during the night. In the meanwhile, Bharat had experienced a ghastly dream. He awoke in a most disturbed state, and seeing his despondency, Shatrughna and his other friends tried to cheer his spirits. Bharat, however, failed to find their joking words amusing. They then inquired from him seriously about his inner disturbance. Bharat explained, "Last night in my dreams I saw my father, disheveled and dejected, fall from a mountain top into a pool of cow dung. As he floundered in the mire, the king drank oil from his cupped palms and laughed hysterically like a madman. Then after the oil was spread over his body, the king began to eat rice that had been cooked in it. Suddenly the scene changed. I saw the ocean had become dry and the moon had fallen onto the earth. As the earth remained enveloped in darkness, Rakshasas wandered its surface while volcanoes erupted, spewing fire and lava. Then that scene evaporated, and I saw the tusks of my father's elephants had been broken. Young dark-skinned women began harassing the king, who was dressed all in black and smeared all over with red sandalwood paste. Adorned with a garland of red flowers and seated upon an iron throne, finally I saw a chariot drawn by donkeys swiftly carrying my father towards the south. After witnessing this ghastly nightmare, I have concluded that my father, one of my brothers, or myself will surely die. Even now, although I know not why, I feel constant fear within my heart. My voice has become hoarse and my complexion has lost its luster. My mind is reeling and I feel shame and hatred, all for no apparent reason. Indeed, the more I think, the more I am convinced this nightmare forebodes great evil. While Maharaj Bharat was speaking, the messengers from Ayodhya entered the room. After offering the respects, they related their message. O Prince, you are summoned to Ayodhya by the ministers and Vashisht. Your presence there is urgently needed. When Bharat asked about the welfare of his parents, they replied as instructed, telling him that all was well. Suddenly eager to depart, Bharat took leave from his maternal grandfather and uncle. Upon his leaving, Maharaj Ashrupati gave Bharat many valuable gifts. However, Bharat hardly considered them because of the urgency conveyed in Vashisht's message and the premonition in his dream. Accompanied by Shatrughna, Bharat mounted his chariot and hurriedly departed, accompanied by a large army supplied for his protection. After passing through various territories in great haste, Bharat arrived at the outskirts of Ayodhya on the 7th day of his journey. Bharat could discern from some distance that the city did not have its usual cheerful aspect. When Bharat then entered the capital, he saw that every stricken. Bharat then confided to his charioteer. The entire city of Ayodhya appeared neglected because the citizens had ceased performing their occupational duties. The entire place looked dirty and deserted. With tears in his eyes, Bharat entered his father's palace. Failing to find the king in his usual room, he hurried to his mother's apartment. As soon as he entered her room, Kaikeyi jumped from her seat, overjoyed to see her long absent son. After Bharat bent down to touch her feet, Kaikeyi lifted him up and placed his head on her lap. She inquired about the welfare of her father and his kingdom. In reply, Bharat assured her that all was well. He said, I have hurried back because of Vasishta's summons. How is my father? I do not find him in his room. She calmly replied, Maharaj Dashrath has passed, my dear son. Hearing this, he fell to the floor, grief-stricken, and began crying aloud. She tried comforting him, saying, Bharat, do not become overwhelmed by sorrow. Pious and enlightened persons remain equipoised and do not give way to such lamentations. Bharat then asked his mother how the king had passed, if he had left any message for him. He requested, please someone send for Ram immediately and inform him of my arrival. As if relating good news, Kaikeyi said, Ram has left the Koshal kingdom, being exiled to the forest. He now wears tree bark, and Sita and Lakshman have followed him. Your father could not bear to live in separation from Kaushalya's son, however, and thus he gave up his life, crying, O Ram, O Sita, O Lakshman. When Bharat asked why Ram had been exiled, thinking he may have killed a Brahman, Kaikeyi, determined to manipulate the events, said, in your absence, the king suddenly announced that he intended to install Ram as their heir apparent to the throne the very next day. To save ourselves from becoming dominated by Kaushalya and her son, I took advantage of the two benedictions your father awarded me when I saved his life on the battlefield. With the first boon, I demanded that you be installed on the throne, and with the second, I banished Ram to the forest for 14 years. Ram was always favorite of Dashrath. He died of a broken heart, therefore you must accept the royal throne this very day after performing the funeral ceremonies for your father. Please take heart and give up your grief. Bharat became fiery with rage. He rebuked his mother, saying, O wicked woman, you must be the goddess Kali herself, appearing to destroy the entire universe. You have killed my father and exiled Ram, who is dearer to me than my life itself. Are you so perverse that you believe I will actually accept the throne from you, especially now? You are not my mother, you are my worst enemy. I pray that you go to hell for what you have done. Sinful woman, I will never allow you to fulfill your selfish ambitions. I will leave now for the forest and bring Ram back to the kingdom. After Ram is installed, I will act as his eternal servant, for that is my natural position and highest aspiration. Are you so hard-hearted that you cannot understand how Kaushalya must feel in the absence of her only son? Once the celestial Kamdhenu named Surabhi happened to see that 2 of her sons had fallen to the ground unconscious. The 2 bullocks had worked very hard all day for the cruel farmer, ploughing the fields in the hot sun. When Surabhi saw them in such a pitiful condition, tears fell from her eyes upon Indra's head. When Indra looked up to see the aggrieved Surabhi, he inquired of the cause of her distress. After Surabhi explained that what had happened, Indra said, in the entire world, no one can be more dear to a mother than her son. Bharat vowed, O wretched woman, not only I will bring Ram back to the forest from the forest, but I too will spend 14 years in exile just to keep my father's promise intact and save Ram from the sin of abandoning his vow. Saying this, Bharat fell to the floor unconscious due to the excessive grief and exhaustion. Then after a long time he recovered and spoke to the ministers gathered there. I have no desire to become emperor of the world, for I consider myself a servant of my elder brother Ram. Being away in a distant place, I had no idea of my mother's wicked schemes. Please believe me, and I say that I had nothing to do with Ram's exile. Kaikeyi's desires are not shared by me. Kaikeyi was not prepared for Bharat's reaction to her manipulations. When she saw that her plans were destroyed, her illusion was suddenly dashed. She appeared to be awakening from a bad dream. Tears welled up in her eyes and her heart filled with anguish. Meanwhile, Kaushalya heard Bharat's voice and went to meet him. On the way, however, she fainted. When she saw Bharat and Shatrughna were coming to see her, the 2 brothers saw Kaushalya lying on the floor. Picking her up, they embraced her, tears streaming from their eyes. Seeing Bharat before her, Kaushalya sarcastically remarked, So you have now come to enjoy the kingdom you have always coveted. You must be very happy to see that everything has worked out so well according to the plan. Upon hearing these words, Bharat was greatly pained. For some time he could not even reply. Then, regaining his composure, Bharat fell at the Kaushalya's feet and with folded hands said, My dear mother, I had nothing to do with Ram's exile. I had no idea what Kaikeyi was doing. Surely you know how much I love Ram. Don't you see how aggrieved I am due to Ram's exile and my father's death? To assure you of my innocence, I swear this oath, whoever has helped in the nefarious plans to exile Ram may reap the consequences of killing a cow, a woman, a child, or an old person. May he become addicted to wine, women, meat, and gambling. May godly men shun him, and may he remain issueless. May he incur the sinful reaction which affects the arsonist, the traitorous friend, and the unfair arbitrator. May be the sin of refusing water to a thirsty man, and he who shuns his wife when he approaches him when she is prepared for conception. My dear mother, Ram is my dear life and very existence. He is my soul, and I have no purpose separate from dedication to his service. Hearing this, Kaushalya gave up her doubts and became convinced of Bharat's innocence, crying as she caressed him. Bharat became overwhelmed by his stepmother's grief, and they passed the night together in commiseration. The next morning, Vashisht told Bharat to give up his grief and cremate the body of King Dashrath. Vashisht then accompanied Bharat to the site. However, upon seeing Maharaj Dashrath, Bharat suddenly lost his composure and began sobbing uncontrollably. Vashisht again urged Bharat to calm himself so the rites can be completed. The procession wound its way to the crematorium. As the people walked before the carrier, they scattered flowers on the road. The body was placed on the pyre and the fire lit, while Brahmanas chanted hymns from the Vedas. All the king's consorts had arrived riding upon palanquins. According to their ranks, the sound of the wailing filled the air. Afterward, everyone went to the banks of river Saryu to offer water for the departed. Maharaj Dasharath, a 10-day contamination period was then observed. Then Bharat performed another rituals for 2 days. At the end of 12 days, Bharat distributed abundant charity to the Brahmanas. At the dawn of the 13th day, Bharat and Shatrughna went to the pyre to collect the remaining bones and ashes so that they could be thrown in the river Saryu. However, arriving at the crematorium and seeing the father's remains, the brothers again became overwhelmed with grief. Weeping profusely, Bharat and Shatrughna fell to the ground and cried out, "Oh dear father, where have you gone, leaving us aside?" Vashisht then comforted Bharat, saying, "My dear prince, you must control yourself so you can execute your duties towards your father. After cleaning the grounds, go to the river Saryu and throw in the remains. The dualities of life and death, joy and sorrow, gain and loss are experienced by all embodied beings and are thus unavoidable. Such overindulgence in lamentation does not befit a descendant of Ikshvaku dynasty." Thereafter, the rites were completed, and returning to the palace, Bharat contemplated going to the forest to bring Ram, Sita and Lakshman. Shatrughna then addressed Bharat, "Ram, who is the well-wisher of everyone, has been exiled to the father on the whim of a selfish woman. My brother Lakshman is certainly condemned. Was there nothing he could do to avert this disaster?" Just then the hunchback Manthara appeared, and although she looked no better than a monkey, her body was smeared with sandalwood paste and she wore a royal dress and valuable ornaments. Knowing her to be the real cause of Ram's banishment, the doorman suddenly grabbed her by the arm and dragged her before Bharat and Shatrughna, exclaiming, "Here is the wicked witch who incited Kaikeyi to banish Ram. O prince, she fanned the flames of jealousy within the queen's heart and thus became the murderer of your father. Take her and punish her as you see fit." Swelling with the desire for revenge, Shatrughna seized Manthara and began to drag her along the ground. Her ornaments broke, scattered her jewels here and there, and the other hunchback companions fled in fear. "Now I shall unleash my long-held wrath upon both Manthara and Kaikeyi, so they will feel as much pain as they have caused others." As Kaikeyi ran to the shelter of her son, Bharat restrained his younger brother by saying, "Shatrughna, women never deserve to be slain. I would have gladly killed Kaikeyi and Manthara myself, but I know Ram would never have forgiven me. Therefore, please restrain yourself." Shatrughna relented and released Manthara, who then ran sobbing to Kaikeyi's feet. In sparing Manthara's life, Bharat showed both compassion and commitment to religious principles. Devotees of the Lord, being filled with all good qualities, are always compassionate. Although Manthara had brought about the cruel banishment of Ram, Sita and Lakshman, the death of Dashrath, and great anguish to all the people, Bharat spared her life because of religious principles. Although she disregarded religious principles, they saved her life just as they saved the righteous who follow them. The next morning, the bards came eulogizing the Bharat in expectation of his becoming king. However, their praises only aggravated his grief, and he ordered them to stop, saying, "I am not the ruler of Ayodhya." At that time, Vashisht, along with his disciples, entered the royal assembly and ordered messengers to summon Bharat, the ministers, the military commanders, and other important citizens. So we will continue our reading tomorrow onwards from here. It was a very sad reading again, because it was all the grief of Bharat and Shatrughna, which had actually started when Bharat had an ill omen as a bad dream, a nightmare, a premonition, and then how he came to the Ayodhya back with Shatrughna on the summoning of Vashisht, and the rest we all have heard and read, and hopefully we will hear a little bit hopeful reading tomorrow in the Ramayana, in the Ayodhya Kanda. So tomorrow is the start of all auspicious Damodar month, and it will carry on till the 30th of November. We will speak more about the Damodar month later during the Damodar month, please offer the ghee lamps to the Lord, 4 times to the feet of the Lord, or to the Yashoda and Damodar Murti or the picture, and twice to the waists, and 3 times to the face, and 7 times all around the Arch Vigraha or the Murti or the deity. And please do this morning and evening. You will get so much mercy from Lord. And we will carry on with the reading next time. I wish you all a very nice day ahead. Hari Om Tat Sat and Hare Krishna.